And the Olmec peoples lived in roughly south-central Mexico. And they had a capital called San Lorenzo. And the Olmecs, from what we can tell from archaeology, and well, there aren't really many written records that we can read, but what we can tell from piecing together history, we most likely think the Olmecs were the oldest peoples in Mesoamerica. And they probably settled down in Mexico sometime around the days of, say, Gideon or Samson. And they were a people there until the days of Plato. So if you can think on your timeline where Samson is and where Plato is, you have a rough idea of when the Olmec actually lived. What's incredible about the Olmec as a civilization is they were the first culture over here in Mesoamerica to actually develop a writing system. In other words, they use what we call pictographs. These little pictures that actually mean words, but actually look kind of like what they're talking about. The Egyptians is something simpler. They had hieroglyphs, which is a little bit different. The Chinese also have something similar. They have something called characters, which is very similar to what the Mesoamericans or the Olmecs actually put down. What's interesting about this language is not only was it the first language, but like most other pictographic languages, it was very difficult to learn. See, in our language, you just have to learn 26 letters, and then you have to learn what they mean in terms of sounds, and you can read. But in these ancient languages, you would have to learn hundreds or sometimes thousands of characters or pictographs, which meant that to learn how to read took years often, and it took a very specialized and expensive education. So they didn't have free schools back then. They didn't have this whole idea of homeschooling where your parents could just teach you what they already know. In fact, in the ancient cultures, like the Mesoamericans, most people couldn't read. And part of that was because most people were slaves, and so nobody was going to train them to actually read. And so what's interesting about these cultures is that they understood that reading and the control of information is a way to control power. And so only the nobles and only the scribes or the priests typically knew how to read. Most of the middle class, if there even was a middle class, and like I already mentioned, those slaves, they were never taught how to actually read.